Yo guys, what is up? Moxxi in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we got some new Borderlands 4 gameplay and information. Now, all of this is courtesy of GameInformer. GameInformer has had a bunch of exclusivity when it comes to Borderlands 4 coverage. Recently, one of their writers was able to play the game longer than anyone has and play Amon and Harlow, as well as interview the devs. And this specific interview is about how the new weapons are going to be working in Borderlands 4. So there is some new information there. There's also a lot of old information. But one of the coolest things is there's some gameplay from areas that are not the Fade Fields. The Fade Fields are the very starting area, where everything is like green and lush, and we're getting our first look at the like more desert destroyed, like dark areas of Borderlands 4 that look awesome. So I'm gonna let this video play. It's kind of my like live reaction to watching this through, and then we'll meet up at the end. I hope you guys enjoy the breakdown. Let's get right into it. Let's watch this.
Looter shooter, right? Like, this is a game genre that this company founded, and they've been working on these games since 2009, I believe. Before that even, that's when the game released, but they've been thinking about looter shooters for over a decade.
Designing the loot system.
I didn't write the Borderlands 1 cover story, but I was involved in the discussions. Randy Pitchford came to Minnesota, pitched us the game. Back then it was a prototype of, I think it was just elevators going to different levels that would procedurally generate an environment and different weapons and enemies. But that was the proof of concept they were showing us. And it was a prototype of, I think it was just elevators going to different levels that would...
Okay, we're gonna watch this all the way through, and I'm not gonna pause, and then we'll go back and like analyze. Because this is already new gameplay. That's level 20.
Procedurally generate an environment and different weapons and enemies. But that was the proof of concept they were showing us, the loot loop, right? Like how there could be a gazillion guns in a shooter game.
Like, it's easy to have a million swords when the picture is the same and it's just the text that's different, right? It's just the variables that are different. But when you're holding the thing in your hand as a first-person model and you see it on the screen from the eyeballs of the character, like, there's an asset, there's a physical model there that has, like, so you can't build 100 of those, let alone a billion. So there has to be a system. Very, very awesome and clever people. Some of my dearest friends in the world
Desert-looking area.
I've been working with for a long time, got together and architected an AI. Like, we made an AI in 2008 that would ingest what we gave it and be able to assemble. Back then we called it procedural generation. It's generative stuff. And it makes the guns for us. That when we give it the material, we give it what it needs, and it generates it. And with that system,
that gun looks crazy.
I remember when Jimmy was the primary architect of that, and I remember
holy shit, that's Moxxi's bar.
Like, he brought me in, and like we had one, I think, was it pistols or rifles first? I don't remember. I think it might have been pistols. We had a handful of components, and we had a handful of materials, and we had all these other variables, and he had his architecture and his algorithms working, and he had it all rigged up. And it was like the first time, okay, well, let's launch it, let's see what happens. And he had a hotkey where I think it was the P button. You hit P, and it would do the procedural generation of all that stuff, and then spit one out into the world. And then we could see it. And we had a rudimentary like loot card that would show us what we're looking at. And it was like, he did it. There was a thing there, and it's like, that looks pretty cool. I'm like, oh, look what it did. And then press it again. And then like I sit down, I'm like, and I was spewing and it was just loot heaven. And I was like, this is the coolest fucking thing. And what's funny is, like, just the spawning of the guns was so fun. It took us until Borderlands 3 before I'm like, we got to have a gun. So like if you beat Borderlands 3, you'll get a gun.
Jolt, dude.
It uses iridium as ammo,
go.
and it shoots other guns.
That's cool.
The bullets are guns. which gives the customers finally that feeling that I had when we were first working with the software that Jimmy made.
In Borderlands 3, we wanted to establish like a manufacturer identity and like having each manufacturer create like its behavioral or gun firing mechanism kind of identity, and then
Let's go, Grant.
The players loved that aspect of the game, and we added more and more behaviors, and then we realized in BL4 like adding more would just lead to like complexity and under like just lots of behavioral overload. So what we did was we wanted to combine.
Whoa! That's a mallow on fire and
could
stickies.
do with each other, and figure out like, hey, like what is the synergy between a Maliwan and a TDR, like elements
it's so cool.
and throwing.
I haven't seen one.
whatnot.
I haven't seen that combo
and
yet.
That's kind of where we started as the inception of the idea for gear in BL4. Beyond that, we knew that each manufacturer had certain like gameplay mechanism shticks that people loved, that people really enjoyed.
More
so
mallow
we
on
just took
stickies.
parts of that, and we just said like, okay, well, this is the defining part, and let's streamline it so that every gun that rolls this can, be whether it's elemental or be thrown or have like Jacob's crit modifiers.
That is definitely
and stuff
some
like that.
aim.
We isolated certain parts so that one, we didn't overload art, but two, that we could say like, okay, if the gun rolls this part, then we can establish this kind of behavioral tree, and if it doesn't roll this part, then we can stay with the kind of mainline balance.
We've established over the course of all the games these really strong brand identities for our manufacturer, and so really we have the tough decision of like we always want to do something new and grow our universe. So we've got that, but then we also have this great history and backlog of all these really beloved manufacturers. So it's a lot of push and pull between the designers to determine like what behaviors do we want this time around.
So before, guns had like so many wildly different parts as we were kind of exploring that system. And in Borderlands 4, we've made it so that like guns have very specific part categories that like if you have like part A or part B through like the weapon inspector, you could see like,
More
okay,
mallow on
getting a damage roll
stickies.
versus like a fire rate roll. So we've streamlined it in the sense of making it easier for the player to understand, and also for us and in general for the balance in the background.
So it's a lot of like back and forth, but then we also kind of look at the big picture and understand like of all the manufacturers, what are going to create the best interplay between them. I also try to like create design lanes, so to speak, and say you're going to get this through this thing. I don't like when anything can do everything. That's kind of like ultimately bland and not special and not unique. And so when we're looking at the behaviors of like the manufacturers, we say, well, Torgs are known for explosions, and that's where you're going to get that fantasy fulfilled. But with licensed behaviors now, you can get that same fantasy fulfillment, but on like a big Vladov, SMG that's got a massive magazine, and now you just got tons of explosions. And we kind of set those lanes, and we break the rules. Rules are made to be broken, but by and large, I think that creates really identifiable gameplay for players to kind of like rally behind and kind of make their expression of their skill.
And can you tell me about the new manufacturers that you're introducing in this entry?
Yep, we got Daedalus, Order, and Ripper. Daedalus, what's great about Daedalus is it has a weapon swap between the type of munitions it uses. So you can go from an assault rifle that shoots like an assault rifle, then you press weapon swap, and now it's shooting like a shotgun. And that plays really nice with a lot of our gear, because now if you've got a piece of gear that says gives bonus damage to shotguns, well, even though you have an assault rifle in your hand, if you swap over to shotgun mode, it's getting those bonuses as a shotgun. So that's really unique.
Cool.
The Rippers, you charge them up briefly, and then they're just automatic. They just spew damage. And then Order, we wanted to Rippers kind of literally tied to the Rippers, of course, and it's kind of like anything goes. You hold down the button, it's just going to let go damage. Order, it's about control, right? So those all by default you hold to charge up and release, and you get like a massive damage bonus for doing that. But at the same time, it's about precision. The assault rifles almost feel like DMRs in a sense. So we actually took the history of those factions and tried to make sure that the weapons represented those in their actual mechanics.
We definitely don't start from a point where like we want to keep things balanced. We definitely start with like fantasy fulfillment and wanting to make things outlandishly badass.
But I never want a piece of gear to be so overwhelmingly better that a player would feel stupid not to use it, or at like such a big disadvantage that it's like someone would be like, well, why aren't you just doing this? This is the win button.
Half the gear in
You know,
BL3.
I think challenge and overcoming challenge is what's satisfying about games. And being handed a piece of gear or something that is just wildly out of whack makes the game less fun. It actually makes it boring. It makes it not interesting. You don't feel choice. You don't feel consequence. And so, you know, it takes a lot of work to do. We have a very complex game with many systems. Like all of our gear is talking to all of our action skills and back and forth, right? But we made some changes this time around, learning from Borderlands 3 and Wonderlands how to better balance the game, how to kind of really be critical with our math behind the under the hood, to kind of hopefully prevent those wildly multiplicative moments of super spiky damage.
What?
You can still create super powerful characters, and we got an end game to talk about later where you're going to get to explore what your character's fully capable of. But I think this time around we're going to do a better job in general of finding that sweet spot of challenge, but still letting players stomp the shit out of the bad guys.
The new traversal mechanics allow a new skill expression for the player. So, and this is part of the connection with the seamless world and the way to attack a certain space from so many different angles. It's the same formula, but from a different dimension.
Interesting. This new area looks very like ruiny.
In the sense that like before
like
you would look at a
crash.
space and you would say, okay, I know I've played this space, I've farmed this enemy over and over and over, and I know what the formula is. Now, when you enter a space, you can choose to enter it from the same spot that you did the last time if you played this content, or you can actually choose to switch up your gear build and switch up your things, and then you feel empowered to do so because you can now attack from a different angle and different dimension, and that's the cool part about what the world has done for our game, is that it's opened up the different ways to enter a space
Pock,
and
thanks for the
combat
28.
it.
While Mr.
And with grapple, glide, double jump, like you can do these cool tricks that just feel natural. They're not like, it's not like you see a puzzle and you're like, oh, okay, I know I have to double jump over this to do this, or I know I have to grapple this to do this. It's like, it's mostly there as like a loose choice to empower you to kind of play the way you want, and then with passives, gear, enhancements,
Yeah, this
new
area looks
grenade
cool. I
types,
dig
heavy
it.
weapon types, you can mix and match to just provide yourself that variety. And then if you didn't like it, or if you wanted to try something else for that same combat or a different combat zone, you can change it up real quick and then you can play that. Like, that's the coolest part of the game. The whole model of like break free not just applies to the lore, but really applies to the gameplay, where we're asking players, like, Borderlands has always been about builds, and now we've empowered them to create even more builds, and we're saying that like the space is now promoting you to play a different build if you want to, right? Because of so many ways to attack this, versus just entering from the same doorway and knowing what you're going to get.
This time around, I really wanted legendary gear to feel really special, and so we balanced the faucet on that to be pretty tight. But when you do see a legendary, you're going to flip out. My goal, this time around is I want every piece of gear to matter.
They're going to show new
literally have
legendaries.
billions of guns. That's a pretty tall order. But we have a great group of designers that we've created this rarity curve to really say, like, okay, early in the game I care about greens and blues, and later in the game you move on to blues and purples, and then purples to oranges. And another thing that we've done too is we've actually like set up our license behavior system to respect the rarity in a way. So what would happen in Borderlands 3 is like the legendaries became kind of the star of the show as part of the anointments and the end game and mayhem for Borderlands 3. This time around, I wanted to make sure that epics mattered just as much, for sure. And so like our craziest combinations of gear are actually the epics. They're not the legendaries. The legendaries, you give up one of those manufacturer behaviors for whatever that legendary behavior is. So now you might be looking for God roll purples as opposed to God roll legendaries or epics for purple. So we've actually kind of like built into actually just how gear is put together, be thinking about how can we make this piece of gear matter relative to any other piece of gear. And, you know, like I said, balance is tough. I'm sure after the game will come out, we'll have to balance stuff. Like I said, no game is perfect. Borderlands 4 will not be perfect. But I think we did a good job of thinking about making gear matter across a spectrum of rarity and balancing the complexity of those parts over time and over rarity.
W. So from this, we did get our first kind of look at Moxxi's bar. I kind of scanned this, and it looks like there's not too many like notable NPCs around besides obviously Moxxi and Zane. And this new bar is going to be called Moxxi's Bottoms Up. It does look like we have a tip jar returning. So imagining you're still going to be able to tip her for like, you know, new guns and stuff like that. I didn't see any like gambling machine through here. I hope they bring those back because like the little gambling machines are very fun. I still to this day have never won the like jackpot in Borderlands 2. It still eludes me. But we do get our first look at Moxxi's bar. There's a lot of footage of this new area. I'm not going to like scrub through all of it, but the biggest thing that I did want to call out is there just seems to be a lot of verticality with this. The area that we've gotten to play is the Fade Fields, which is a lot more like rolling hills and trees and stuff like that. There is verticality to it, but it looks like this is kind of taking it to the next level. This area that they're playing through in almost all the scenes seems to be some sort of like there was a city here, and then when Elpis crashed into it, it created all of this debris and destruction, and everything is like without a roof, everything is in ruins, everything is crumbled, but it was like a city once, and we see, you know, this building with the verticality here, and in the background there looks like this big massive fortress with these huge walls, and obviously with our new movement, I think we're gonna be able to like maneuver around everything here. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. There was another GameInformer video that came out that was a bit more of an interview style. And the coolest thing that we learned from that video, in my opinion, because I'm not going to make a guide or a video for it, is the fact that GameInformer might have a lot more exclusives and info for Borderlands 4. With the thing that they teased that I'm very excited for is it seems like they're going to be doing deep dives with all of the characters, including Amon and Harlow. So where we get our skill trees and where we get a bunch of like Amon and Harlow info from besides just their action skills might be GameInformer. I'm going to have a link down to their YouTube channel and down below if you guys want to go sub and check them out so you can know when they post more Borderlands 4 content. I will catch you guys in the next one. Take care. Peace.